Jay, as promised, I did mention to you just before we started that I'm going to throw a little surprise on you. So here it is. So you don't know me. I think that's fair to assume. But I do know you, and in fact, Jay, can I tell you something? You know, you've actually made me cry before. You've made
Really?
me cry. Hello and welcome to another episode of TFF, and we're back with a +1 episode after our 2 debate episodes on the Premier League and the Super League. We're now joined by a very, very special guest with what you'll agree in maybe an hour or so's time is a remarkable story. Jay Demerit, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
My pleasure, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm doing fantastic here in the mountains of British Columbia, Canada, as an American, but yeah, ready to share some stories and hang out with you guys for a bit.
Lovely. Sounds good. Jovan, Alex, how are we?
Yeah, doing well. I'm not in the mountainous region in Canada, that's for sure. Just sitting here, Toronto, Canada, looking over the flat surface. So not too bad.
I'm definitely excited for this episode. I'm always a fan of an underdog story, or someone that's unexpected accomplishing something great. So I'm in need of some inspiration. It's been a little bit of a downer where I am with lockdowns and COVID. So I'm ready for a good uplifting story today.
Awesome. Jay, as promised, I did mention to you just before we started that I'm going to throw a little surprise on you. So here it is. So you don't know me. I think that's fair to assume. But I do know you, and in fact, Jay, can I tell you something? You know, you've actually made me cry before. You've made
Really?
me cry. You have. You look stunned. You've made me cry. So let me show you something. So you might guess where this is going, but I'm a massive Leeds United fan. So this is that's my wall there.
Okay.
So I've got a collection of different tickets, and if I just show you this one.
Oh, I remember that ticket.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my golden ticket, really.
Yeah, that's your golden ticket, not necessarily mine. So
Yeah.
that was a long journey home from Cardiff. It was quite funny because we picked up the bus from Watford and to Cardiff, and we were playing Watford. But yeah, that was an emotional day. So hopefully we can rebuild that relationship today.
Yeah. That was an emotional day for both of us. Put it that way.
Yeah.
We both felt a lot that day, Morgan.
Contrast of emotions, let's say. And what came after that? It was all downhill after your goal, really, to be honest. But
hold on, I got something for you. Hold on.
Okay, this sounds good. I like this.
There you go. You're gonna love this.
I'm scared.
None of this on the episode yet.
Jeez. That's the
No.
End of the match. Leeds v Watford, Coca-Cola playoffs 2006.
Oh, it's a heartbreaker.
rubbing some salt in the wound.
Try
That's-
again,
That's
but
awesome.
Oh, my boys Healy and Host, they let me down. Oh, takes me back. Oh, those were some emotional days. Anyway, so that happened. That's sick though that they gave you the ball. So I guess let's get straight into the story, because some people out here call you the American Jamie Vardy, if you will. So really looking forward to hearing more about it. But yeah, take us back to the early days. So you grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. So what was that like, kind of playing at that level, keeping it kind of local before obviously going away for college?
Well, again, blue collar towns like Green Bay, Wisconsin are, there's a couple reasons you like them. One is because, people really respect each other. They're hard workers. They're blue collar. They get up and they help each other. They ask each other how they are. And so for me, growing up in that culture, I think really helped. But both my parents were teachers. So, I was around education. I was in the gyms. They were both gym teachers, actually. So I was just surrounded by sports my whole life. My dad was a coach. Yeah, my mom was a coach. They were both athletes formerly. So, I grew up in a very athletic family. My grandma's in the Wisconsin Track Hall of Fame for being a coach. And so I was just always around people that cared, but were competitive. And I think when you're competitive, you keep people accountable. I think that's the best thing about competitive edge is that it keeps you people accountable. So if I didn't perform well, my dad would be like, well, last week you played well. Like, what happened? They were able to just do it in a way where I never felt like I was, being called down upon, but I was being challenged and I was being asked why things were happening. And I was, being, asked why I didn't perform as well as I did last week, because my parents were coaches and they know what accountability is. And I think that was kind of how my education started, in being someone that held myself accountable. And in the end, that was one of the reasons why I made it, is because I knew my accountability scale that I created. I wasn't working on someone else's accountability scale. When you get to high performance, that comes from you. That doesn't come from anybody else. But that's a
100%.
learned trait for the most part. It helps when you have good mentors, which I did. My parents were great. I had an older brother who challenged me, who was nice to me. He was 3.5 years older, so I'd go kick around with the older kids and they'd beat the crap out of me, but ask me how I was doing or say good job if I made a good play. Like, I had a brother that was able to do that. So I think that kind of helped with my mindset. I was always challenging myself with people that were older than me, and that helped. And I think the last thing that really helped me was that I was a multi-sport athlete. I played basketball in the winters. I ran track in the spring. My dad was the track coach at the high school. So I was always around athletes and track and football. And each of those brings a different toughness, both mentally and physically, but it also brings a different team dynamic. And I think that was a really interesting thing for me, especially as I became captain later in my career, was how to manage different personalities and different people. And when you're a track athlete, it's you versus you. When you're a basketball athlete, it's you and 4 other people. When you're a soccer player, it's you and 10 other people. So if you think about those things as little different communities, it's different. How you deal with each other, how you work in your own, how you work with your own mind, that's different. And so I had a good experience going through all those motions and working with different coaches until I was 18 years old. And at the end of that, again, because I did that, I wasn't a high performance player. I wasn't this kid that was like an academy product that was, on the first team since he was 12. Like, I wasn't that at all. I was just a good athlete. I had a good attitude, and in a way that turned out to be my greatest asset, in all honesty. As anyone watched me play later, I still was never a great footballer. I made it work, but we'll get there. But at the end of the day, I think that was kind of my foundation. And I had one small scholarship to leave Green Bay, Wisconsin. I had a Green Bay scholarship to stay. I'd play Division I soccer. Yep. I had a small Division III basketball scholarship to a team in Western Wisconsin, so still a state school. And then I had, again, as life always says and presents opportunities from different people, my high school coach, who used to coach at the university in Green Bay, knew the coach in the Chicago University, and because they're in the same conference. So he called him up, and he's like, he is 65 and retired and is old Italian guy. So he's like, I got a buddy down in Chicago that's coaching the UIC team. Let me call him. And so because he trusted me, he liked my attitude, he thought I had a lot to work on, but still a lot that I could improve and show. So he called him up and said, hey, I got this kid up here. He doesn't want to go to school here in Green Bay. Will you take a chance on him? And that was kind of the first person that took a chance on me because of somebody else's advice. And so again, you always have to remember how you treat people, because sometimes it's someone else's advice that might get you your opportunity. And I think for me, because I worked hard in training every day, because he saw my attitude, he had the confidence to call somebody that had never seen me play and be like, hey, trust this kid. He'll come and give you a good job. Yeah. And it worked. And so I went down there and I wanted to challenge myself against better players. In Chicago, of course, if anyone that knows the States, there's like 6 or 7 places in the States, California, St. Louis, New York, Chicago, that were like all the best players from those around surrounding states go. And so that's kind of what I did. I went down to Chicago to test myself against these better players. And I came in last in line, $2,000 a year scholarship, which was nothing. And, kind of sat at the back of the line as humility teaches you. You know what I mean? If I would have been the kid that was at the front of the line talking about how much I knew when I didn't know much, I mean, that's not going to serve me very well. And so I waited in the back of the line for my opportunity. I came in as a freshman. I was going to be redshirted and because, they saw my athleticism, but didn't see my skill sets yet. And it just turns out that my first preseason, I was a forward. Again, I came in as a forward, and I've been famous for being a defender. So this is kind of how that worked. Is my first preseason tournament. I was on the bench, not playing, and all of a sudden there was a red card to a defender and an injury to a defender. And all of a sudden we had 2 games left in this preseason tournament, and the coach is like, "I don't have anybody. we played a marking back system. So he's like, Jay, athlete, come here. Like, have you ever thought about doing this? All you got to do is take their forward. Mark them out the game and just run with them and try to disrupt them and do that kind of thing. And I was like, well, funny enough, coach, that was my job on the basketball court that I played with until I was 18. So I know the mentality at least. So I'll give it a shot. And again, being coachable is saying that, sure, coach, I'll give it a shot. That's being coachable one-on-one. And number two, I guess you have to trust that people might see something in you that you don't see. And I think that it's a huge thing to do sometimes because we have our own egos to protect, right? Like we're always like, well, I'm a forward, coach. Like, what are you talking about? I can't play D. You just recruited me to be a forward, screw you. Or your ego goes, no way, coach, I'm a goal scorer. So screw you. Like ego does that too from a personal level. And so I kind of had to drop both of those and go, okay, coach, if you see that I can do this and I drop my ego and go, I'm a freshman. I just want to play. That made the decision happen. And so that's kind of what I said yes to something I was uncomfortable with, but I took faith in the fact that he maybe saw something that I didn't see. And so that kind of equation allowed me to say yes. And I always say this very famously. I played the rest of those 2 games and I started both of them. And by the end of that second game, I realized that for 19 years, I've been playing out of position.
Yeah.
In
it's
2
just
games.
about that open-mindedness. It's just about being open-minded when these things come up. And you're right by saying that it's all about mentality. It really is, because when you think about the players, let's take basketball and football. Let's think about players like LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Messi, Ronaldo. What's the difference between those players and other players? Why they're still so good into their kind of 30s, late 30s? It's all mentality. How they're able to keep up to that level. It's all about having that mentality. That's the difference, really, when you get to that top level. If you're trying to, maintain that into your 30s, even towards, being 40. Look at Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well. It's 100% all mentality at that point. So it really is important throughout your career, no doubt.
And that ego conversation, you'd think, and that's why there's only so many that get to that really high performance 10-year pro, 10-year all-star. Like, that doesn't happen often in sports, in any sport. And it is that mentality that really becomes the driver, because if you start making the $5 million a year contracts, it's really hard not to have your ego creep in. It's when you're at the club and everyone wants to talk to you and you're making all the money, driving all the cars and thinking you're the raddest thing in the world. And it's hard. It's hard to stay humble and keep working when you're the best in the world. And because everyone already tells you that all the time. And so it's I have so much respect for those guys that, like, the Messi Ronaldo conversation. I don't care which one you choose. The fact that both of them have been at the top of their game, winning player of the year back and forth for the last 10 years, I can't even fathom that. And I was a 10-year pro. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even imagine what that would be like to be the best, because everyone wants to beat the best. Everyone's chomping at the bit to beat them and beat them. And nobody's been able to do it.
They haven't even had a peak. Their whole career has been a peak. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so that to your point, mentality was the big thing. So kind of getting back to that story. Now I was a college soccer player that was playing. I had a lot to learn, but again, I went after it, and I made sure that I was asking questions. And by the end of that 3.5 years, I turned into an All-American defender. I was now one of the best American, collegiate players in the country. And again, I wasn't at Stanford and I wasn't at, Clemson and Duke, but, I was still at a D1 school and I was getting some looks. And I was playing in the summer in Chicago at PDL, which is the Professional Development League, and getting some eyes and saying, who's this kid? Because I came out of nowhere. I didn't come from academy programs, and any structure in the world, for the most part, there's an academy program and then the professional team, same everywhere. And in America, it didn't really exist as much back then as it does now. Like, I probably would have came through academy if I had to do it now. But it wasn't my story at the time. And so it was just one of those things. I thought that I was good enough. I thought I was going to, get drafted by an MLS club, or at least get walk-ons. But, as life always does to us at certain times, it reminds you that you shouldn't get ahead of yourself, and you shouldn't let ego take control and think that you've made it when you haven't. And
Yep.
I didn't make it. I didn't get the email. I didn't get the call to say, oh, hey, Chicago Fire wants you to come and train with them, or, the Colorado Rapids wants you to come and train because you're the 87th pick of the draft. I knew I wasn't going to go early, but I had inklings that I might get picked. And I didn't even get a walk-on tryout from an MLS club. I got one call from the Milwaukee Rampage, which was the USL team above the PDL team that I was playing with in Chicago. And they were called the Milwaukee Rampage. And they asked me if I wanted to come and try out. And that was it. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a draft. It wasn't anything. And I was like, whoa, okay. I guess it was a bit of humble pie, but it was also this whole, you got work to do now because, you're not even on that ladder. What are you going to do? And this kind of crossroads, I was important to go to school, and it was important to my parents that I finished before I tried to do anything with professional soccer. And it was important to me too. And so I went to school for design. I have a degree in industrial design. And so I wanted to finish it, but at the same time, I was still playing for that Chicago team. And at the time, I was picking up this kid from England who was visiting his dad who lived in Chicago for the summer. And he started talking at the end of the season. He's like, hey, at the summer season, he's like, I'm going back to England to live with my mom. He's like, I've been impressed by you this summer. I think your game suits the English game. You're an athlete, but you like the physical side of it. You can compete with good forwards, blah, blah, blah. And so then he's like, have you ever thought about coming to England? And I'm like, I'm at the bottom of the ladder anyway. So I'm like, I don't care. I got to start somewhere. And I knew my path in America was a 4-year deal at 18 grand, and I'd never get out of the net, in all honesty. And that was the future of soccer in America at that point. So again, I had finished my college degree. I had been through a lot in my life, and I was like, screw this. I'm going to Europe, man. I'm going to go knock on some doors in Belgium, go hang out and check out what Amsterdam's like. I deserve this opportunity to travel. And I think we always need to make sure that we're rewarding ourselves in our stories too.
Yeah.
I don't think we as humans give ourselves enough reward and enjoy these moments. I just worked my ass off for 5 years being a student athlete to get a degree. I could take 2 months and go hang out in Amsterdam and, go to Cologne, Germany and check out some cool stadiums. And why wouldn't I do that? You know what I mean?
Was it a it moment? Was that always a desire? Was kind of like a it kind of moment? Let's go do it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, partly for sure. I think, you need those, you have to. And I think that's life. And if I'm going to, take chances on life, I got to take my wins too. You know what I mean? And I think that was a win moment. Go to Europe, figure it out, have a roof over my head. I wasn't paying rent at my buddy's mom's house. Yes, I was living in an attic on a mattress on a floor, but for me, that was luxury. I was living in London for free, man. Come on, that's rad.
I've been doing all my life. It really is the dream. I can second that.
Yeah. So to that point, that's huge, right? There's so much to debunk there, and when you're going through, I don't want to take too many steps backwards, but you're basically going from a child who was introduced to all different sports, and I think obviously got the benefits of all that. I mean, you mentioned, when you're at the time going to university, the MLS was just started. So in terms of a look to play at the program game, did you ever think past those 4 years that you were going to have, or was it just, I want to challenge myself in a bigger city, in a bigger environment, and whatever happens after happens? Because obviously, I guess that route to the MLS wasn't exactly paved at that time. Before even going and taking that risk to England, that I'm sure you got a lot of questions at that as well. What are you doing? You're going over there. I mean, I'm sure that was the case, and it paid off. And looking at retrospectively, you obviously made the amazing decision. But walk us through that, just in terms of, okay, you're going to school, great, but did you ever think about this school is a stepping stone to play pro, potentially at the MLS, or even obviously, what happened after obviously happened.
Yeah, well, I kind of looked at it all as part of the experience, and I'm someone that really likes more than one thing. I like to challenge myself with other things, from mindsets to skill sets. It's like, I've always naturally kind of been like that. I'm also been trained like that just by having parents that supported me and do a bunch of things. But at the end of the day, for me, when I was at the bottom of that level, knowing I had a long shot to make it pro, but I also knew my story. I knew how far I'd come. I knew that in 3 years I had changed positions and become one of the best college soccer players that almost made a draft of guys that have been playing for 12 years in front of me. You know what I mean? I looked at that. And again, my job is it was a big picture thinker instead of saying, I'm not from Chicago. I'm not from Stanford. Screw that coach for not taking me. All that stuff. Those are just excuses about why other people don't make it. And they don't know their stories because they're listening to other people. I knew my story and I was listening to me, but I was doing it with a humble approach, which means you are listening to other people. You know what I mean? You're not doing it with ego. You're doing it because a coach told me that named Brett Hall that played for the Chicago Sting and the Chicago Fire. And he's like, Jay, he was my coach for that Chicago team. And he's like, Jay, you're just coming from the other side of the tracks. That's harder, dude. He's like, but I see in you what I see in me. And that's a survival mentality. Coaches over time are going to love that more than they love how that guy bends the ball around the wall.
Preach.
They're going to love that. And so keep going. You need those influences. You need those coaches. But unless I asked him that question, Brett, what do you think? You think I should go to Europe? What do you think? You think I can make it in the MLS? Like I was asking those questions too, as the pupil, as the mentee, you know what I mean? As a mentor. So, I think that's a two-way street. I was doing a lot of that at that time. And in the end, I looked at the two paths, MLS. What's the light at the end of that tunnel? Not as bright as the one over here where I can travel to Europe, get some life experience, live in London for a couple months, and maybe make it as a professional soccer player in the biggest league in the world. Sick. Oh, that's where I'm going.
Yeah.
And so, because again, I always believe you can always come back to where you've already been. I do. I believe you can do that, whether it's school, whether it's a job you've had, whether it's something. You can always go back to what you already know. You can.
Yeah.
It might be like getting a job again that you just left because maybe that job's not available, but I guarantee that job's available still, and you already know what that's like. And so for me, I was always the one that can push this because I'm like in my heart, I'm going, I feel like I can do this. I feel like I have so much a limited experience in my 3.5 years of actually playing high performance soccer. Like, what if I have another 3? I like that. I can make it pro. I know I can. And I'm going to go to London, which looks sick. And I'm going to go hang out with my buddy and go to Amsterdam and go, we went to Nice, Amsterdam, and Germany for a month and a half. We ran on trains and rented bikes and knocked on doors and went to stadiums. And it was awesome. You know what I mean? Like that's what it's all about. And that's when I fell in love with European soccer or football, as they call it over there. That's when I was like, I can't leave this culture. No way. I'm not going to go back to Chicago. You know what I mean? Like sitting, in a very minimal MLS stadium. And Chicago was one of the best teams at the time. So that was the best one. But it was still in a growth state. So England was by far the best answer, by far the most challenging prospect. But something that I was like, fuck it, as you said.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, two questions. I mean, the first one is, would you say there was someone you looked up to that was maybe an American playing in the first division Premier League that you maybe looked up to and said, I want to be like that person? Was there anyone yet to do that? Because I know obviously a couple goalkeepers as well, Tim Howard, Brad Friedel were big Americans, and we're seeing kind of recently, but kind of looking back at the time, was there someone you looked up to?
Yeah, I mean, to answer that question, Brian McBride was the one. He was from Chicago, and again, so I had been in Chicago for 5 years, so he was kind of the local hero. He had played for the Chicago Fire, and then had signed for Fulham, and he had come into the Premier League and had been doing a really good job. And he was a blue collar guy. He led with his elbows. He was a physical player like I was, and so kind of he was my inspiration, to know from a guy that from Chicago can go there and do that. Why can't I? And
yeah,
Fulham had signed 3 Americans at the time.
Dempsey as well, right?
Another guy named Carlos Bocanegra. And so I was like, that's the club I want to support while I'm there. And so, yeah, like all those pieces kind of fit. And then in the end, again, it was English football culture that, again, I continued to fall in love with. My first game was QPR Tranmere at Loftus Road. And I'll remember it for the rest of my life. I'd never seen a game like that before. And with the hum for 93 minutes, and Loftus Road is like this little block, 25,000 seat stadium when you can touch the guy that's throwing in the throw in. And I had never felt that before in America. And so even in a smaller scale at 20, 30,000, you can feel like like there's 100 in there. And that really is what kept me there. And I was like, well, I need to feel this on the field. Like it's cool in the stands. This is amazing, but I want to feel that when I'm in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. And before we talk about how you actually ended up playing football in England after moving here, talk to us about the actual transition. Because for me, I grew up in England and I moved to Canada for university. And for me, there was quite a culture shock, quite a difference to adjust, more than you would think when you go from like North America to the UK, vice versa. So how did you find the transition quite smooth, or was it quite hard at first? Trying to also start a career whilst you're adjusting to a new lifestyle.
Yeah, I think anytime you go to a new culture, it's an adjustment. Especially, we'll put it this way: it should be an adjustment, because what I really, one of the things that we talk about through our programs with Rise and Shine now is just the respect factor, and how whenever you enter a room, there's 3 versions of respect. One is for yourself, the other is for the people in the room, but the last one is actually for the room. It's where is it? What is it like? Who's in it? Where is it? All those types of things. When you respect the environment, it's a whole new mindset.
Yeah.
And so I made sure I did that when I walked into English locker rooms. I knew they'd think that I was some 23-year-old schmuck who didn't know how to play because he was American. And I had to earn my right to sit on the bench first, then play. So that's what happened. I was 12th division, 23-year-old American sitting on the bench of a Sunday league team. On the bench, I'm like, how could I ever make it to the Premier League and the World Cup thinking that I'm better than that? Because I'm not. I'm on English shores trying to make it as much as Jim with the Vaseline on his eyes. You know those guys.
We know those guys, yeah.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I got to respect Jim too, because Jim's in front of me right now.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that was my mindset. And in a way, the good thing about the English too is that it's so small. It's you can get from Bristol to Newcastle in 4.5 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a concentration of people and scouts and people and things and players that have good experience. So for me, I looked at it as the opportunity. I'm in a concentrated area to get really good really fast because this coach has been there. That coach knows a scout that can get me to Rotherham. That coach knows that. Everybody knows somebody in England, whether they're truthful or not. They'll tell you that they do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that's the way I looked at it. I needed to respect the environment, know that these people knew more about me or knew more about the game than I did, and then use that as a learning experience on the field. And then once I get on that field, crush it and make sure that I start. And so that's the idea. I started the 12th, got my start after the first 3 or 4 games because I'd finally trained with the team a couple times.
How did that come about? Was it just a matter of reaching out to them yourself and just saying, hey guys, I want to play. Do you want to check me out?
No, it was Kieran, the guy that I went there with. He had some contacts in those lower divisions. So him and I played on this team. And so I walked in there again. First 6 months, I was playing under his brother's name. I couldn't, all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of how it started. So it was just Kieran's contacts. And then from there, it was just play. So you get the game and then you play well. And then I'm starting. And then all of a sudden we play against, some team that just signed the forward that got released from QPR last year. And all of a sudden I'm playing against a guy that was in the first division last year. And I'm doing well. I'm doing well at that game. And then all of a sudden the guy on my team who played for Wales is like, dude, you're getting really good now. What else, and I'm going, yeah, what else can I do? That dude was from QPR. What can I do to get to QPR? And then I'd start to ask those questions and then they would tell me those answers. And sure enough, that guy was the one that ended up getting me an opportunity to go. I had a trial at Oxford. This is kind of a fun story about failure. And I'd kind of been working my way through the ranks. I was getting some opportunities and trial games and things. And then I got asked to go to Oxford. And I think Oxford was in the 3rd division at the time. So I rent the car, or we use Kieran's mom's car, and we spend the 20 pounds that we had left from our weekly wage of 40 pounds a game playing in the 12th division. Get up in the car and get our way to Oxford. It's 2 hours, and we get on the field and we warm up with the team in our Oxford jerseys, and we're thinking we're cool. And we get on the bench, and we sat on the bench until the 87th minute. And in the 87th minute, they put us in the game, and I think I pushed the D up once, and I didn't kick the ball once, and then it was okay, hey, we'll call you. And so there I am thinking, I've spent all the money and I'm finally waiting for my chance to get a professional team. And I come and it's 3 minutes and I'm like, I don't even know how to deal with that. You know what I mean? Should I be pissed? Should I be excited? Should I feel like I had my chance and now I've missed it? Now I've failed. And now I got to go call my mom and say, yeah, I got my trial and I didn't play and I didn't make it. Like, that sucks because I've been waiting for a year to tell her that.
Yeah.
Because, you want to do those things. And so, one side of my mind was failure. And then the other side says, and this is the one I listened to, you just hopped 9 divisions in 1 year.
Yeah.
And so that's where my mind went. It's this whole idea of, we can look at it as a failure. We can look at it as this failed opportunity, or we can look at it as, I'm doing pretty well here. Keep doing what you're doing.
Glass half full, half empty, right?
How important is that? Like talk, because that happens with everyone. I mean, whether it's football, whether it's anything. I mean, how important is it to just, as maybe maybe all the logic and all the doors are pointing to, what, things aren't going well. How important is just to say, be naively positive, optimistic. Say, hey, those are 6 minutes, and as you mentioned, you hop 9 divisions. It's about kind of telling yourself, and really, in the end of the day, is what's going on in your mind is in your mind. The way you perceive the situation is entirely up to you. 100%. So obviously that's kind of taking you places, and I think that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, and I think to your point, positivity is the key to that mindset, and positivity is the most important part to adversity. Because adversity, when you have it, and there isn't a person in the world that doesn't, it happens. It does, to all of us, and it may not be on the field. It may be off the field. When you just at the time when you score the hat trick, you come back off, and your friend got in a car accident. Literally, it happens all the time. And people that don't expect adversity, we're not looking for adversity, but we should expect it. And so for me, that was an adversity, but it was something that I expected, but it was also something that I could take that adversity and turn it into something positive. And so that's what I always do when adversity comes. I figure out what the positive things I can find from this shitty situation and put my energy into that. And that's what it was. And in that moment, when I was in the car ride home, it was like I could worry about the calls I need to make to say I didn't make it, or I can think that I've come 9 divisions in a year. I'm going to keep focusing on that and make sure that's my message in my mind.
Yep.
And guess what happens? I go home, I have to share my failures and say, yeah, I got a couple trials. I haven't made it yet. Yet, being the key word, because my progress was in my mind, and that I need to do it one more time. My mom didn't want me to go back. All the jobs, people that wanted me to stay, in Chicago that summer, I was like, no, you guys, I'm making progress here. And I went back. I had my preseason with Northwood, which was a 9th division team now.
Northwood.
So I jumped
I know Northwood.
3 divisions. Yeah, so I jumped 3 divisions to Northwood, and they had a Watford friendly in that preseason. And I was like, that's my game. I'm going to that game. I'm going to play well. I'm going to be ready for that opportunity. And that's what happened. And again, within, that year, I had signed for Watford and played 30 games as a rookie. Like, it's amazing how things can change in 1 year. And you just got to have faith that you can do it. But you also got to have the attitude to make it happen.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm watching, like, a TED Talk kind of thing, just listening to what's happening. And I'm like, Alex, you got to jump in here. You're supposed to be engaging in the conversation. But all this kind of stuff that you've been saying, it's like I paid you in advance to give a speech to the teams I coach. Because, like, this is the mentality that I'm trying to explain to them all the time. And especially with what's going on right now, like, they're stuck at home and they're having to find ways to motivate themselves to keep believing in the dream. And, like, how do we keep working and how do we keep putting in those hours when we have no idea when we're going to be allowed on a field again, like, how do we do that? And I think it's so important, those points that you bring up about, appreciating the success you've had so far, but still respecting the work or the grind that needs to be done and taking those moments to feel good about yourself. And I think, I've had this conversation with people in the past, and being an athlete at any level, but being a competitive, maybe even a person, but being in that sports world, you gain these skills of constructive criticism and how to handle that and how to understand that it's making you better. And you'll see, you can go into an office and you can tell, very often, not all the times, but you can tell who's played a sport and who hasn't, because you'll give a comment to someone, and if they've played a sport, they're like, you know what, I appreciate that. I'm going to go work on that. I'm going to get better at that. and you'll have this other person that's like, you know, feeling personally attacked. And I think that's the difference to make it to that next level, to make it to that top level, is recognizing that any feedback is building you, it's helping you move forward, and taking those moments and accepting those moments of, you know what, they didn't notice me this time, but they're going to notice me next time. And it's crazy in sport. Like, I got recruited for university scholarship in a warm-up of a soccer game in 3 minutes. And that's all that it takes, right? You never know when people are watching. And I think that that element of positivity that you mentioned, like being able to understand that maybe it's not necessarily positivity for people, but just understanding that it's the moment that you drop your shoulders, or the moment that you're like, you know what, I've messed up, or it's not for me. That moment that you drop that shoulders, that's the moment that, you know, you're kind of giving up on yourself. And that's sometimes the universe works that way. Like, the moment you drop your shoulders is the moment someone's going to look at you, you know, and you cannot allow that moment for that person to see you with your shoulders. Like, you always have to have the shoulders up, the chest up. Like, you got there for a reason. And I have this conversation with the female players that I play. You're going to get questioned, you're going to get asked, you know, are you really that good? And it's all about believing in yourself and just saying, like, I am good. I've made this team. I've put in the work. I've trained all these hours, and someone's going to recognize that work. And like, you have more to tell in this story, but I'm getting excited. I want to go and have a locker room talk with people now, and like get pumped up for a game.
I have a great story about that what you just talked about. I have a
Yeah.
great story that I tell. I call it the tunnel mentality. You know, I'll tell it later, but well, actually, I can tell it right now because we're here talking.
Go for
it.
it.
It's basically this. I call it the tunnel mentality because we all need to stand in tunnels to get to our big games. And big games are metaphorical, right? A big game is a job interview that you've waited for. It's a tryout that you're wanting to make a team. It's to get into a school that you want to get into. Again, it's a metaphor of your big game. And before any big game, especially because we're all football fans here, is that you have to stand in the tunnel. And that's the last moment you have with yourself before a bunch of stuff goes down. And so within that, I always talk about the tunnel mentality. And this story was the first time that I played against Manchester United. And it comes to the point where we make it to the Premier League. Again, I walk there. I play 30 games in my first year at Watford. Second season, we get a new hungry manager that believes in me as a player, really empowers me. I become a good player. And in my second season, we beat Leeds, Morgan, in the championship playoff final. And maybe we'll get to that story in a bit. But at the end of the day, we win. And in my third season only, and basically sixth year of only playing soccer at a high level, I'm a Premier League soccer player with the best players in the world. Everyone knows it. Everyone signs the biggest clubs, the biggest badges, the biggest stadiums. And now I'm starting to think about it a little bit more. And I'm like, second game of the season, our first game at Vicarage Road, is when I really realized about like the pressure that comes with playing in the Premier League, because you know everyone's watching, and you know billions of people watch in the Premier League all around the world. Mm-hmm. And so within that, I call it the tunnel mentality, because when you stand in the tunnel, I remember this is my most personal story of it, as I remember sitting there and I looked to my right, and this was when Ronaldo had Edwin van der Sar as the goalkeeper, Ryan Giggs on the wing, Wayne Rooney up front, Ronaldo on the left wing, Paul Scholes in the middle, Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic at center back.
Beckham wasn't still there, was he?
No, he had I think left the year or two before.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at these guys, and I'm in the lineup. Again, I'm one of the 11, right? But I'm looking at these guys, I'm going, wow, Ronaldo is really good looking. He's gonna crush me. Wow, he gets Paul Scholes. He's got one of the best long balls in the world times 10. That dude's gonna just make us run all day. You know, and then you can and you look at their badge and you're like, oh my God, I'm playing against Manchester United, the biggest soccer team in the world. Oh my God. If that's the case, I know that the world's going to be watching, because they all want to watch Man United on the weekend. So I got billions of eyes on me right now. Oh my God, that's scary. Oh my God, what if I f up? Oh my God, I get to play against Ronaldo, blah, 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 blah. So the whole idea is like, I can sit there and focus on it and think about why that player is better than me. Think about the crowd that I don't want to make a mistake in front of. Think about the millions of people that are watching that are going to put pressure on me to succeed or to make a mistake. And that's going to feed the energy into me going out and making that mistake, having Ronaldo have a day with me, Wayne Rooney ripping me out apart for a back post goal. That's when those things happen. And so for me, in those big moments, and I had them throughout my career, I always made sure that I focused on the tunnel mentality to go out there and get excited. And so what I would start to do is say, number one, I'm a part of this 11 that was chosen by someone that is not me. Take advantages that you deserve to be in this tunnel right now. And you can say the same for the person that's on the bench, because I guarantee you 50 people tried out for those 25 spots for your team that you coach right now. So even the people on the bench should be happy that they're there, because there's others that didn't get that opportunity, right? And so, that's the first thing I thought of. I'm here. I got chosen by a coach to play in the Premier League. Sick. Take confidence that you're that player. Ronaldo is awesome. I get to play against Ronaldo. I can't believe I get to go out and test that dude's reputation for the next 90 minutes. I take pleasure in testing the best of the best reputation, because I forgot that all the people in the stands and the billions watching on TV think he's gonna roast me anyway. So take energy in the fact that what if I'm the day that he doesn't like it? What if I'm the day where I get to be the one to clip his toe right at the last second and he doesn't get that goal? Why can't I be that player? I'm at one of these 11 that was chosen by someone else to go out there and challenge that opportunity. Take opportunity in that. Manchester United is the biggest club in the world. You get to go out and play Manchester United and challenge their skills and their players. So by the time I get out in that tunnel, I'd be like, let's go. I get to go out and play in front of my fans. I get to. So it's like turning the I have to's into I get to's. And I know you guys have probably heard that line before, but in practice, it's a lot harder than just saying I have to's and get to's. Like, for real, the practice is very different. And so that's kind of when the calls would come, and I'd get in these big moments with big brands or big people or big players, and you can easily psych yourself out. It was those moments where the tunnel mentality was, you always are in this position. Somebody else chose you, so take confidence in that and now go out there and do your job. And most times not that mindset really served me well.
Yeah, Mr. Demerit, we got to get some copyright on that. That tunnel theory, I think you got to take that. I think, that was really interesting. And I think what you were saying about the way you approached, those United games is by saying, the worst that's going to happen is people aren't going to be surprised because, Rooney's just too good or something. Like, that's a form of positivity in itself, if that makes sense. By recognizing that the worst case is really not the end of the world, then you can suddenly look at it from an angle of, what have I got to lose here? Let's just go out and play. And sometimes having that freedom can actually increase kind of your performance, I think. Playing with that freedom. Definitely. But I think the next thing we all want to hear about, let's hear more about your Watford career. Take us through the journey of, when you got there, playing in the championship, that big step up. What was that like, the adjustment of playing like, top, championship still very, Jovan likes to say it's one of the toughest leagues in the world to get out of. So championship is like a phenomenal standard. And when you do it, just end by answering this question. So you talk about all the positivity and how in that Premier League season were you able to still flip it as a positive? Because in a sense it is positive because you made it. You made it to the Premier League. You played in the Premier League. But obviously you guys kind of fell short that season and going straight back down. How were you able to turn that season, which was obviously going to be quite tough mentally because, there was a lot of draws, a lot of losses. How do you still turn that into, a positive as you get towards the end of that story at Watford?
Sure. And, for me, the Watford experience was just an incredible experience. One is because I always appreciated them because they gave me my shot. They didn't have to take a chance on me. They didn't have to sign me, and they did because of what they thought I brought to the table. So I always wanted to bring what I had to the table first and foremost, and really appreciate them and the way that they treated me. And then at the end of that Premiership season, I had a good season, and I had a couple other, I'm not going to say offers, but there was some interest. And 80 Booth, our manager at the time, and again, we had a good team. Marlon King playing up front. We had a good scoring punch. We had a good D. I think we had 9 clean sheets our Premiership season. And so if we would have scored goals on half of those 9 clean sheet days, we would have still been there. And so we had a good defense, and we had confidence we were going to go back up. And the next season, by Christmas, we were 10 points clear to go straight back up. And then Marlon got injured. Darius Henderson got injured, and we stopped scoring. We limped into the playoffs at Hull. And but the thing is, midway through that season, they offered me the captaincy to stay in the championship. And so I didn't go to any of the other Premier League teams because I was like, well, if I'm going to – I love Watford. I want to stay here. And I do think that we can go back up, and I wanted to lead that team because I was always one that – I always relish leadership and role more than money, in my opinion, because those things last longer. In my opinion, and I've also had no money, so I know what that's like. So I don't get scared of it as much as maybe I should.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's why I choose leadership and role play over money, but. It definitely serves me now. You know what I mean? And for me to be a leader of that organization, to be offered a captaincy to stay, and still with a decent monetary value where I didn't feel like I was being cheated of a contract, because that's real too. You still want to get the most out of your deals because you only get a couple of them in your whole career. You know what I mean? You have to be conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I was, but I chose that. That's the reason I stayed and took the captaincy to stay in the championship after our premiership season. And again, like everyone knows, it's so hard to get out, and we didn't get out, and we limped into the playoff, lost to Hull, and that was kind of my first test in leadership, because going into that game, I wasn't playing very well, and A.D. Boothroyd took the captaincy off me for that game, and we lost, and I always say that's why we lost as a joke to him. But that was one of my first tests in leadership, and I look at that time of my life as a bit of a crossroads, like, should I stay in the Premier League and go be that player and sit on the bench at Stoke to make money? I guess I can keep the same attitude and work my way off the bench and then earn my starting spot at Stoke and then do the same thing that I've been doing my whole life. But I'm like, no, I've made it to this. I'm a captain of a team in the championship. I'm being compensated well for my time. Like, I'm not going to sit here and complain and say I need more money or go to the place. I was just like, I need to run this out. And for me, it was a great test in leadership. To get things taken away from you is always hard. It's humbling. It feels like failure. And the athletes and the high performance people, we don't like to fail. We don't like to feel like we lost. And that felt like a loss to me. But in a way, that off season, going into the next championship season, AD and I really strengthened our bond as a leadership group. Like we had honest conversations. It was the first time I actually had real honest, hard conversations with people, heated, where you get things taken away. And I'd never seen that at a professional level. Because in the coaching level, when you're a college athlete or you're a high school athlete, there's a hierarchy there. You're not really mano a mano, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And so for me, like, to be a captain of an organization, you do have it's not an mano a mano, but it's much closer in a hierarchy level when you're a captain of a club, because you're actually in the coach's office a lot and you're talking about tactics and you're talking about players and performances, and because that's what a captain does. Captain isn't just someone that plays well on the field, or you're in the community, you're in the leadership group, you're talking to the manager, the assistant coaches, you're trying to talk tactics, you're talking about feedback about what went right, what went wrong. You're really getting into those communicative levels, and that really helped me learn how to communicate at a high level, learning that like the people in front of you that you respect a lot and you don't agree with that opinion is a hard conversation to have, especially when your job is almost on the line there. But yet you're the captain, so it's your job to tell him things he doesn't want to hear too, from a managerial perspective. Or, oh yeah, Jim's pissed off that you didn't start him because you told him you would on Thursday. Like, what happened? You know what I mean? Like, that happens all the time. And then he's like, well, I didn't think, and then now I got to go deal with Jim because Jim's pissed off and he's got mental health issues because now he'd feel like he failed because you told him he was going to start. So now I'm got to deal with him because he doesn't want to talk to you. And so now I'm over there talking to Jim, trying to pump his tires again. And now that's taking up my time. You know what I mean? And my energy to go.
And the Brits don't hold back when you get to these situations.
No, of course not. And they'll tell you exactly how it is, which again, I'll always
Which I love. Yeah, I love that about British culture.
But at the end of the day, it doesn't make it any easier for me as a captain. So, that was an interesting time for me to learn how to communicate at a high level, to understand that bosses are still real, but you need to stand up to them if you're going to do your job as the player leader and the community leader and the person from the player's perspective. And so that time is where I think about that. And then from there it was World Cup stuff. And it was like, do I want to stay or do I want to get the World Cup and use that as a shop window to kind of go to the next to the next level. And so that's kind of what Malky Mackay was kind of at the managerial helm. I played with Malky. He was my roommate, and we didn't get the hierarchy right because we weren't buddies anymore. He was a hierarchy a little bit above, and I was kind of clashing with him because we were buddies and roommates, and then that changed. And sometimes it's better to sever those ties and keep it amicable than to keep trying to butt heads and about what it used to be like.
Yeah.
And so that's why I left. And at the time, it was a great opportunity. Malky really helped with my exit and got me in the right places and really helped me make the World Cup, because famously in that year is when I had my corneal replacement. I had a full corneal transplant in my eye and was out for 6 months and had 3 months to get back to fitness where I would be considered to make the World Cup for the summer, and had a full eye transplant, sat in the dark for 3 months. Like, that was the deepest and darkest thing I've ever had to do. And most people don't even know that story because it takes about 45 minutes to tell. But either way, that was kind of this whole make the World Cup and then use that as a next springboard to finish your career somewhere. And that's kind of what happened. And the World Cup, I mean, if you guys have any more questions about Watford, but was the spring. Make it the World Cup.
Before we go over to the World Cup, I mean, it sounds like the whole Watford experience, it almost sounds like you were playing with house money, in the sense that when you get to Watford, you've made it. Like, that is everything you've worked for since even before when you were waiting for the draft for the MLS. Like, everything from those moments, working hard at college, it came down to playing for Watford. So whatever happened, I mean, it worked out pretty nicely. That playoff final experience, for me, there's nothing better. I mean, these are all just bonuses, though. As soon as you get there, that's like, and you just take it all in and just enjoy it. I mean, that's kind of what it sounded like the experience was. And as much as it's going to pay me, I want to hear more about the playoff final day. Just talk, because surely that was one of the best moments in your football career. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about it, even though, I'm going to hold back the tears and that. PTSD and all that, yeah.
Well, exactly. That's the whole be glad that it happened kind of idea. But yeah, it was, the playoff final. And to your point, I think, leading with humility has always served me. So that is definitely something that I start with from my foundational approach to anything in mindset. But that being said, that playoff final was the springboard to the next level. And so I needed to take that with less of a humble approach. If you lose, the humble approach still wins. But you prepare for that, because that moment changes your life completely. So you do have to take the I'm happy to be here level and take it a little bit more serious on days like that, because those moments can put you into a whole new stratosphere when it comes to your life. And that's where preparation is key. And one of the things, because you got to make sure you're ready for that moment. And it's funny, you talk about TED Talks. I gave a TED Talk 3.5 years ago about
Vancouver. I watched it.
Yeah. And it's called, Are You Ready for a Sunny Day? And what it means is that, what Ted found most interesting about my story was that you can put it down to 3 moments. It's the moment that I chose to be a defender and crush it. So I knew that was me. That was one moment really in time. It was this ability to make a decision based on my own strengths and my own personal ability to understand myself, to say yes to going to Europe. And then in my career, it comes down to my trial game against Real Zaragoza in front of 25,000 people, when I was told that I was going to come in to be a part of the game, and they never told me I was going to start. And I came in against the Spanish giant, and I found out 30 minutes before the game that I was going to be in the starting lineup to play with 10 professional players for Watford that I had never even trained with before with the first team.
Yeah.
That moment, and then the playoff final to get to that other moment. So it comes down to a couple different things. And it was in those moments I won. I didn't lose those games. I didn't lose those moments. I didn't lose to those moments. And it was, and those were my sunny days because I was ready for them. And the fundamental issue and the whole TED Talk is about, we are humans. As humans, we're trained to think about what happens when shit goes wrong, or what happens when the rainy day happens, or what happens when I lose my job. I guarantee if you ask 90% of the world, they would know those answers. But would they know the answer if I knew that you wanted to be the head of photography at Red Bull, and I knew that the head of photography was leaving, but the intern didn't, or the next job didn't, because they didn't prepare that they knew that answer? And then all of a sudden they came in on the day and they're like, oh, Jim left. They're taking interviews tomorrow. Would you be ready for that interview? Because you've thought about it, you've prepared about it, you've visualized for that moment for when you come in and knock it out of the park. Like there's a whole process that's required from a mentality and a physical training perspective to get ready for that moment. And so the playoff final was that moment. I had spent all my whole life trying to get to those moments where I could be considered a pro. But when I was a pro, I didn't just take it for granted. I worked hard. I asked the hard questions. I stayed after training every day because I wanted to be a Premier League soccer player. I didn't just want to be there anymore. Yeah. And so that prep for that season was led by A.D. Boothroyd. You know, he was a young, hungry manager that really brought in the mentality approach. He was one of the first young managers to really do that. Talk about what we felt like. We'd go into feedback rooms after the game and we'd have a go and we'd all sit in a circle where we couldn't hide from each other. And we'd have hard conversations about, oh, I thought you should have covered me on that goal. Or, you know, you didn't communicate me through. And I thought that comes bad communication at the time, tough communication. But in the end, next week, I know when that player is running a runner past me, he's going to tell me. Because he just told me in front of 30 guys he forgot to. That's accountability, but it's also like this willingness to communicate and get better every day. And so that's what we did. He enveloped this thing, I call it the circle mentality. Every Sunday after the Saturday game, we'd sit in a circle with 30 of us that had to do with the game, and we'd open lines of communication about what happened. And each week we'd grow because of it. And by the time we got to that playoff final, we had limped into the season. We had lost the first 4 or 5 games. Ray Lewington got fired. A.D. Boothroyd came in. By Christmas, he had us believing again. He had all of us playing our roles. He was the first manager that actually took his arm around me and walked me around the field. He used to do it to a player after every training session. He'd grab one guy, put his arm around him, and walk him around the field. And every one of us would have a different story about why. But for me, it was, I know how far you've come, but what do you want to do here? Do you want to be a part of this group? Do you want to lead this group? I believe you have those intangible skills. I think your leadership capabilities are good. You've seen a lot. You're a very relatable guy. What do you want to do with this team? No coach have ever asked me that before. It was, do you want to play next week? Or, you know, good job. You know what I mean? Like, I thought you played well. Like, it wasn't like, how do you feel? And how can we work together to create, you know, a better version of this for all of us? And
deeper relationship.
He was the first coach to do that. And really, I'm a coachable guy. I really like to be coached. I like critique. I like that kind of stuff. Some players don't, and that's fine too. They need a pat on the butt or a pat on the back or an arm around the shoulder. And again, there are those players too, and they bring equal value to a team. But for me, I wanted to hear criticism. I wanted to tell him how I was because I was born from communication and getting better every day. And that really helped me with my relationship with him. And he really made me a better player that year. And so by that middle of that season, me and people like me were feeling more empowered and more confident in our abilities to go out and be a championship player at that level. And by the end of that season, all of us were running on cylinders, and 30 of us were all on the same page because we talked to each other every weekend about what happened. And at the end of that day, and you saw what happened on that day, we were more prepared. You ever watch the tunnel? If you watch the Rise and Shine film, like you'll see the tunnel approach and you'll talk about the tunnel mentality. Listen to our tunnel. We're jumping up and down. We're yelling. We're getting pumped. And you look at Leeds and Eddie Lewis, I knew him at the time, and he was like, you know,
the American, of course.
Shoulders, and Rob Hulse is looking at the ceiling, like going like, oh, we're going to walk this game. And if you watch that game, 3-0, you know, it just didn't look in their favor at all, you know, and I feel like
at no point.
And again, talk about mentality. And I think that was an earned right that we had as a team throughout that season to get better and to prepare for that sunny day. And there was only one team that was going to win that day. And unfortunately, it wasn't your boys, Morgan.
Yes,
I
okay.
think
My
that
boys
point
Helium
about
host is
why,
fine.
though, is like, I think that point you made about why, though, and asking that question why is so important because, you know, you're going to have an objective, you're going to have a landmark, you know, as you go along, like, okay, I want to make this team, I want to have this opportunity, I want to do this, I want to do this, but you have to understand the why. Like, why do I want to make that team? Why do I want to have this accomplishment? Why do I want to do this? Because if you don't make that team, if you don't maybe reach that accomplishment, if you don't know why you were trying to why you were trying to get there in the first place, the feeling of failure and that feeling of being let down, if you don't understand why you wanted it, it's like so much more crushing. But if you're like, you know what, this is why I wanted it, and I can find another way to get that why, like, that's how you persevere. That's how you keep moving forward when you have a setback. You have to ask that why. And like, obviously, you're telling us examples of how it worked too, and like sitting in that circle. I've done that circle exercise before, and that is a wild experience. But yeah, no,
Well, and to your point, it's a communication exercise for two parties to understand the why too. The why
yeah,
should come from the person from a foundational standpoint. It has to come from you originally. But the way
yeah,
you get to the best why, or even more than one why, and this is also
mhm,
the key to the next part, is like sometimes one of the whys isn't working, so you got to find the other why as to why.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know what I mean? Also, if
yeah,
you rely on one why,
yeah,
sometimes that why is taken away. Then you're like, now what?
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
So I think it's important from a communication and a coach player standpoint level to find more than one why too. It's
hmm,
because I'm a team player and I love being with people. That's a why too. So in the days where you're 0 for 8 on from the free throw line, you're still pumped because you're with your people. You know, like there's more than one
exactly.
why
Yeah.
in this current conversation. And he started to get more to your point, a deeper version of why. And I think, you know, we knew from our purpose what we were there to do on that day.
Yep.
And again, there was only one team that was going to win.
Very true.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I have to head off. I just got another meeting a little bit late too now. But honestly, was this? I mean, every episode we do is interesting. However, like I don't think it's ever happened that you said something and then I had to take a note down. I mean, that's like these things. As kind of Alex was mentioning, it's very. It's a lot of things because obviously I don't know if I mentioned, but like Alex also coaching in Canada and there's a lot of things we're trying to, especially when you're trying to be a coach when it's all online, you have to really lead in as you said adversity and try to take the positives. Like that's kind of what I wrote down. Take the positives any challenge because you have to in a way we have to be grateful for these challenges because there's a lot of learnings that either as a person you could take or the ability to lead a team and to coach players that obviously have more. So no, I mean this is I wish we could speak another few hours because I can learn a lot from you and yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and I think you and or Morgan and Alex will enjoy the last few minutes of this episode.
Definitely.
Well, awesome.
Preach.
It's nice to meet you as well. And I guess from a coaching standpoint, the last thing advice I can give you is is to make sure that each of those players feel like they are different because they are. And I think as a coach, we get stuck in either the players' egos or our egos. And it's easy to say that we know that all the kids are different or all the players are different, but actually acting on that philosophy is much harder and much different. And so be open to that and be open to, making sure that each person is treated individually, but under the same umbrella, if you know what I mean. And I think that as a coach is the best advice I can give for people that coach people underneath us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'll definitely take that in my toolbox. And actually, like you, I'm going to be heading off to, soccer in Canada is great as well. There's a lot of opportunities to be heading to Serbia to take on a coaching role there. Cool. So I kind of relate to you in terms of kind of packing the bags and taking some risks. So no, I appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll have you on again because.
For sure.
I'll have you on and I'll bring a massive notebook. Today I only brought a paper.
Yeah, I know. And I originally said I wouldn't need an hour and a half because I like to talk as much as everybody else, of course. And there's so much here, like that's always the joy of having the story. And for me, the privilege to tell it is because I get to live it. But there's so much stuff there and so much experience that I really just enjoy sharing it. As you can tell,
Yeah.
I like to talk about mentality a lot. I teach it too. I'm a coach. I run whole programs of youth development for teenagers and it's all of its important work. So, again, keep up the good work and we'll see you soon.
For sure. Thanks a lot.
Definitely.
All the best.
If it's cool, we'll talk. We didn't get a chance. I want to hear a bit more about the international playing in the World Cup. I mean, wow.
Okay. Well, yeah, I suppose the World Cup is for me as any footballer is the ultimate, anytime you earn the right to play for your country is the ultimate. But when you can do it at the world's biggest stage in any sport, it's the ultimate, that's for sure. And, for me, it was that little bit of a crossroad to even think that I was going to make it. I thought I had done so much. I had beat Spain in the 2019. That was kind of my coming out party to the US team because I had spent on the bench. I was a Watford player. I was in Bob Bradley's camps for 2 years, but I had only had 2 caps. I'd only played twice. And so the Confederations Cup in 2009 was really my springboard into getting the opportunity for the World Cup in 2010. And So that was in South Africa. Bokanengra got injured right as we were heading to South Africa for the 2009 Confederations Cup tournament. And my first 3 games were Italy, Brazil, and Egypt. And so for me to come off the bench cold, I think, again, being a leader at Watford really helped me own that experience. You know, if I hadn't played for my team and I had been sitting on the bench at Chelsea, I don't know if I'd be ready for those experiences. But because I had been playing well for my team, yes, it was in the championship, but it was still high end performance. And I was fit, I was ready. I'd played against all the best players in the championship and in the Premier League through FA Cups and things like that. So I had a little bit more confidence maybe than most would going into those situations of the playing against Brazil and Italy. But I think, again, as always, I'd been waiting on that bench, imagining that time and visualizing that experience and where it would be and how I would make sure that Bob, you know, picked me again. You know, I wasn't used to that opportunity either. I had been in that situation a bunch of times in my life too. So I guess I was just waiting. I was waiting for that opportunity, and that Confederations Cup presented itself. I knew I had an opportunity. Sometimes it's better to play against the best players.
Mm.
You know, I don't want to go be in the Packers and then go play against the Cleveland Browns because I'll win and no one will pay attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so in a way, I've always kind of relished those big opportunities because that's when everyone's watching. That's when everyone cares. And for me, that's what that was. That was I get to go play against Pirlo, Luca Toni, these guys that are, you know, Cannavaro, like World Players of the Year. Great, let's go. And because if I play well, Bob's going to take me seriously. And because before the games, even my 2 caps was like Guatemala and a friendly. And I think it was one other game against a Gold Cup opponent. And it was in the early round of the Gold Cup. And it wasn't really, you know, those games didn't really mean anything. And there's a difference when you get to international soccer too. There's a difference between Guatemala in Colorado and Spain in the Confederations Cup.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So,
of course.
You know, for me and my mentality, it was very much, okay, I deserve this opportunity. I've sat on the bench for 2 years waiting for this opportunity. And so just like the trial at Watford, like, let's not go out and mess it up. You're prepared for this. You're ready for it. Now go perform. And that really helped me. That got me in, you know, to play all those games and to get to the final. I don't know if you guys remember, but we made it to the final of that Confederations Cup. We beat Spain, snapped their 30-game win streak.
Wow.
Fernando Torres, David Villa, I was playing against those guys, and we played really well, and we beat them handily 2-1, snapped their game with a winning streak, and then lost to Brazil 3-2 again in the final. So, you know, my coming out party with the US was against the best players in the world over and over again, and that really gave me the confidence to think that I could go and play in a World Cup the following year.
Yeah.
But again, adversity hit me right in the face. Right as I thought I'd be a World Cup player, I got an infection in my eye and lost 70% of my eye tissue to a staph infection in 36 hours. Jeez. And I was blind. I was completely blind in my right eye. I was seeing through a stained glass window. I didn't know if I'd ever even play again, let alone playing a World Cup. And so again, it was a whole nother story about my mentality. I sat in the dark for 3 months. I had to let my eye and the scar from the transplant surgery heal. I had to play with a stitch in my eye for 2 months while I started playing for Watford again to stay fit. I couldn't look at TV screens. I couldn't look at TVs because it would just upset my eye. So I would just sit in the dark. I sat in the dark for months with nothing but my thoughts and visualization techniques and things like that. But it really allowed me again to go within myself. And as long as you got yourself, you don't need anybody else, in all honesty. And I learned that from a younger age. And I think that mindset always served me. As long as you're honest with yourself, you know, you don't want to sit in this ego land of where you think you're awesome or you're better than everybody else. That's not true either. But at the end of the day, I was always comfortable with myself and my abilities. So in that time, I just sat in the dark and I used it to my advantage. I did visualization techniques. I learned how to do it. I listened to podcasts and radio and imagined myself playing against Wayne Rooney and what I would do and what he's like, because I've played against him before. And I just spent a lot of time doing stuff like that instead of feeling sorry for myself or how much my eye hurt. You know what I mean? Like, you can do that, but why would you? And so that really allowed me to, when the opportunity came again, and I'll tell you again when that opportunity was, it was Bob Bradley had seen me play. He knew I wasn't fit, but he calls me up and he's like, Jay, I know that I wasn't your fault. And he's like, you were my guy before this happened. And I don't want to let you go because of some freak accident. He said, but I need to know you're ready because the World Cup is serious and I can't just bring somebody in the squad if they're not ready. And I took that on the chin and I said, of course, just give me the opportunity. And he's like, okay, I'm going to call you in next month. We have Holland at Amsterdam Arena, at Ajax Arena in Amsterdam, and I'm going to call you into that game. And that's your game. If you play well and you show me that you're fit and you show me that you're ready, I'll take you, or you'll be in much, much higher consideration as we enter into the final camp for choice. And, Robin Van Persie, Dirk Kuyt are playing up front. These are guys that are playing for Liverpool and Arsenal, the best players in the world. And again, I took that opportunity and I flew to Amsterdam and was back with the team with the purpose of being in the starting lineup. And again, I didn't play my best game, but I did what I needed to do. And Bob knew I was fit. He knew that I was ready, and he took me. And so that kind of, to the upleading of the story, it was something that made me have more confidence going into the World Cup, because no one knew what I had been through. Kind of to your point earlier, like when you come in and the rest is roses, like the fact that I got there and made the team was roses. And I was like, wow, God here. Now I'm just going to keep a positive attitude, be ready for my games, but go in with, again, that humble approach that do the best you can with what you got and don't waste this opportunity is really my mantra in life. And so that allowed me to get into that World Cup with a good attitude. I'd been through so much just to get there. And then the England game meant so much to me too, because England was the country that gave me my opportunity. And so I kind of took that game pretty personally because I wanted to perform well, not only to prove to the English culture that I was a good player, but to prove to myself that these opportunities should be taken advantage of, not taken as something that you just kind of experience and say that was awesome. You want to make the most of your big opportunities. And so for me, that was it. England was my opportunity to first get in the map and do what I wanted to do. And
you nailed it 100%. The game wasn't awesome from a game's perspective, an own goal and a kind of a boring game. But for me, Wayne Rooney was the Premier League player of the year that year for Manchester United. And whether you pair that with the La Liga player of the year in the league play for clubs, that's the best player in the world. The best player in the world gets player of the year for La Liga or the Premier League. Yep. And so I walked into that game knowing I would have to mark Wayne Rooney because Gooch, my center half partner, would be up against Emil Heskey because he's big, tall, and strong, and Wayne Rooney was sitting on his shoulder. So I knew he would be my responsibility. And so again, I came in with that attitude. I'm playing against the best player in the world today. Good. Let's go play against him and see what happens, because what if I play well and what if we do well? And that was the best game I ever played in my life. And I got it. I got my contact to see 4:00 on that day. I got a motorcycle couriered because I lost my sight and my contact wasn't working and I had all this pressure on me. But I got to that game seeing with 2 eyes, ready to play against the best player in the world. And I just relish those moments. I really do. And I just made sure that he didn't get the ball much and that I was on him right away. And I knew he was a competitor. And if as soon as you let him turn and face you, you're in trouble because he can do anything once the ball's at his feet.
Exactly. And he can hit it from 25 as much as he can push it past you and hit it in bottom quarter. So it was just, for me, it was all about cutting down his space. And I knew that I had to have more energy than him and I had to match his intensity. Which again was one of my skills. I can match competitive edge. That was one of my skills. People didn't like playing against me because I wouldn't let go. I wouldn't stay off their hip. I wouldn't keep my elbow from hitting their rib. I wouldn't keep my, and people didn't, those types of guys, even the best competitors didn't like playing against me because I was that person. I got 93 minutes to do my best. And usually if I'm a bulldog and my best is just to make you annoying and to disturb your rhythm, goddamn right, let's do it. That was always the mentality and what made me succeed at that level. I wasn't a good soccer player. I get the ball in my left foot, get it off my foot. I didn't want it. I didn't want to play. I roll it in. But again, like at that level, you can roll it into your midfielder and all you got to do is defend. Same as the Premier League. It's not hard to play soccer at that level because all you do is win the ball and give it to somebody that's better on the ball than you. And so those were my easiest years typically because all I got to do was what I was really good at, and that's be a competitive defender and make sure that you're competing for 93 minutes against really good athletes. And I was able to do that really well. And so, those moments, those served me and I was able to play. And that World Cup was great. We beat Algeria famously in that last kick of the game to win our group for the first time. I'm that goal famously happened in the 3rd minute. I got my tongue cut in half out of an elbow from an Algerian, and my tongue split
Oh my god.
to the middle of my tongue, like
Nice.
sideways. And so if you Google any picture from me of the Algeria game, I have like this blood Kool-Aid mustache thing. It's like around my mouth because I was spitting blood the whole game because they couldn't stitch my tongue because it would take too long for me to come off. So I had to stay on or come off. And I'm like, no, this is our last game of the group. I'm one of the kind of emotional leaders of that team. And, I want to play. And so I just spit blood and would every 10 minutes would go over to the physio and he'd put like Vaseline on the big cut. And that would get me another 10 minutes before it would start gushing again. And so, we get to the 90th minute. Landon Donovan gets a Clint Dempsey deflection, and we go and score in the last kick of the game, and we win. And we're in the locker room, and I'm getting my tongue stitched up, and Bill Clinton comes in with a cooler of Budweisers, and we're partying in our locker room with the former president of the United States, and I can't even talk because my tongue is swollen out of my mouth. And, that's the kind of stuff that are the memories that you never ever forget, and it's those moments that it's all worth it. It's all worth it. The good, the bad, the ugly, and everything that comes with it. And, because those are the moments that we do it for. And that was my World Cup moment. That was my favorite moment. We lost to Ghana in extra time the next moment, but winning the group and slamming beers with Bill Clinton was my favorite moment of the World Cup for sure.
I would like to think so, to be fair. Mate, that sounds awesome. It sounds to me like you were in English football at the perfect time for your style of play, because firstly, you sound like you're quite physical. Like part of your thing is like pissing off other players, being a nuisance to get into their heads. And obviously nowadays you got VAR firstly, just watching your every move. And then secondly, on top of that, you got players who you touch them and they go down like someone carried a knife in their boot, just whip down, just stab them in the leg, even though they've barely made any contact with them. It's one thing I hate about modern football, but it just sounds like, with all that, you kind of got in the game at the perfect time for your style of... And obviously now they're looking at defenders, and can a defender play out the back? Can they play that long ball? And it sounds like you're more of just a reliable defender on the defensive side. And I think that was more the style back, 10 or however many years ago, 10, 15 years ago. That was the style, just solid defenders that can get the ball down, get it out, and just move on. Whereas now they're looking for a defender like John Stones who can charge down the pitch, get around a couple players, knock a pass, 40, 50 yards. So it sounds like you got into the game at the right time as well for your style of play.
Yeah, I think so, and I think I exited at the right time. But that being said, one of the stats I'm most proud of in my career is that as I was known for an aggressive, competitive, raw defender, I never once got suspended for yellows in my whole career.
Wow. Did he ever get a red?
One red on Rob Hulse against Leeds.
No way. In the league game?
Earlier that season, I got sent off, and Rob Hulse baited me at the middle of the line from the back, and got me from behind. Didn't even touch him, but got me sent off. And maybe that was retribution in that playoff final later in the year. But that's my Rob Hulse story with the red card. But yeah, no, I never was suspended, so I never got more than five yellows in a whole season. And as someone that was competitive and was throwing his body around a lot, I call it. And this is what A.D. Boothroyd, my manager, always used to say about me. He said the thing about Jay is that he's such an incredible competitor, but he has aggression without anger. And what that means is, like, I didn't come into tackles trying to kill the guy. I'd come in trying to compete with the guy to affect his first touch. And if I had the athleticism to get a touch on that ball, that was just me being aggressive. That wasn't me being angry or trying to take it out on some player. And so the best defenders are aggressive, but without anger.
Yeah, definitely. I think, what's probably cool, correct me if I am wrong, but what I'm kind of picking up is, what's cool about telling your story is the way you tell it each time is always a bit different. It's never like exactly word for word the same story. depending on how the conversation goes, you tell it in maybe a different order, or you kind of tell different parts, little side stories that you weren't sure if you were going to mention, just based on how a conversation goes. So even though the storyline of the story is always going to be the same, the way you tell it kind of varies a lot, because it is such an amazing story with so much in it that, you know, kind of covering it front to back is always going to look a bit different.
No, and I appreciate that.
Jay, you know, we've kept you a lot longer than planned, but the master of mentality, Jay Demerit, thank you so much for joining us on what a Friday afternoon for you now, I guess. Early afternoon in Vancouver. We've got Alex over on the east side, and obviously me in the UK. But yeah, Jay, thank you so much for taking time to speak to us today, and just kind of accepting us as we kind of reached out on a limb, hoping you'd get back to us, which you did very quickly. And now we've got this amazing episode, and you've had another platform to tell your story, which I think is great. Really appreciate it. And yeah, as I said, we'll keep in touch. And when you come England, definitely let me know.
100%. I'm a pint fan too. So you can take the Wisconsin out of the kid, but you can't take the beer out of Wisconsin. That's for sure.
Exactly. Classic. Anyway, thank you for listening to the Footy Forum. This has been another episode with Jay Demerit. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or hit the follow button on audio platforms. And yeah, just keep giving us feedback, because the feedback helps us grow as a podcast. And yeah, hope everyone has a good weekend and all the best. Take care.
Thank you.